"Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Effective. Immediately. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Selena Hayes stood frozen in the marble lobby of Rigor 8, the company she had built from nothing more than code and determination. 2 security guards in black vests flanked her, their faces carefully neutral, as if they weren't in the process of escorting the founder and CEO from her own building. "I'm the founder," Selena said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Not anymore," the taller guard replied, his hand hovering near her elbow, not quite touching, but making his intention clear. The receptionist wouldn't meet her eyes. The junior developers hurrying past with their morning coffees suddenly found the floor tiles fascinating. Even Marcus from accounting, who had joined when they were just 12 people in a converted warehouse, turned his back and pretended to study his phone. 5 years of 16-hour days, of sleeping under her desk, of pouring every ounce of her soul into building something that mattered reduced to this moment of humiliation. They had already deactivated her keycard. Her company email bounced back undelivered. The parking spot with her name gone, replaced with a generic visitor sign. It was as if she had never existed, as if Rigor 8 had materialized from thin air rather than from her bleeding fingers on a keyboard at 3 in the morning. That night, alone in her empty apartment, with boxes still unpacked from the move she'd made to be closer to the office, Selena powered up an old laptop she'd kept from the early days. The screen flickered to life, displaying a login prompt that nobody else knew existed. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, entering credentials for a system that had been her first creation at Rigor 8, a ghost network designed to monitor internal security breaches that even the IT department didn't know about. The dashboard loaded. Camera feeds blinked to life. Audio streams connected. And then, cutting through the darkness of her apartment, a familiar voice filled the room. "Once she's out, we move everything to Cayman. The patents, the algorithms, all of it. By Monday, Rigor 8 will be a shell, and she'll be nothing but a footnote in our success story." Selena leaned forward, her heart pounding. That was David Chen's voice, her co-founder, the man who had stood beside her at every investor pitch, who had promised they would change the world together. On the screen, she watched him clink champagne glasses with the other board members in the executive conference room. To the future of Rigor 8. Another voice chimed in. Sarah Williams, their CFO, without the dead weight. They laughed. Actually laughed. And Selena realized with crystalline clarity that this wasn't a sudden betrayal. This had been planned, orchestrated, executed with the same precision she had taught them to apply to their work. Only now, she was the security breach they were eliminating. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check the news." With trembling fingers, she pulled up TechCrunch. The headline made her stomach drop. Rigor 8. CEO. Selena Hayes Street. EPS down. Due to mental health concerns. Ahead of historic IPO. Mental health concerns. They were painting her as unstable, unreliable. The comments were already flooding in. A mix of false sympathy and thinly veiled satisfaction that another diversity hire had cracked under pressure. She could practically hear the whispers at the next conference. "You know what happened to that girl at Rigor 8? Just couldn't handle it." But they had made one crucial mistake. They had forgotten that before Selena Hayes was a CEO, before she was a founder, before she was any of the titles they had just stripped away, she was a hacker. A very, very good one. Selena Hayes had learned to code the way other kids learned to ride bikes through scraped knees. tears, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Growing up in West Baltimore, she discovered programming at the public library, hunched over outdated computers, while gunshots echoed outside. Her mother, Patricia, worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. After her father left, and young Selena promised herself she'd build something that mattered, something that would lift them both out of poverty. By 15, she was freelancing as a white-hat hacker, finding vulnerabilities for small businesses who couldn't afford big security firms. The FBI recruited her at 19 after she exposed a massive data breach at a Fortune 500 company, not for money or fame, but because her mother's personal information had been compromised, and she was tired of seeing regular people hurt by corporate negligence. But it was her mother's experience that truly shaped Rigor 8's destiny. Patricia Hayes had worked as an administrative assistant at Preston Financial for 23 years. Perfect attendance, glowing reviews. Then a security breach leaked internal emails where executives mocked employees, shared salary information. And worse, Patricia's supervisor had written extensively about wanting to replace her with someone younger and less urban. The lawsuit went nowhere. The company claimed the emails were doctored. And without proof of authenticity, Patricia was left with nothing but a pink slip and a reputation for being difficult. That night, watching her mother cry at their kitchen table, Selena had made a decision. She would build something that protected the truth. Not just data, but the messy, human truth that powerful people tried to bury. Rigor 8 was born from that pain, that fury, that determination to ensure no one else's mother would sit at a kitchen table with empty hands and a broken heart. The technology was revolutionary. While other security companies focused on keeping hackers out, Rigor 8 focused on keeping the truth in. Their AI could detect document tampering, verify authentic communications, and create an immutable record of corporate interactions. It was like a polygraph for the digital age. And companies were lining up to implement it only to protect themselves from lawsuits. For 5 years, Selena had poured everything into Rigor 8. She'd recruited the best minds she could find, regardless of background. She'd fought tooth and nail against venture capitalists who wanted to water down their mission for profit. She'd insisted on maintaining majority control, even when it meant growing slower than their competitors. The other co-founders had seemed aligned with her vision. David Chen, a brilliant engineer from Stanford, who said he was tired of building toys for rich kids. Sarah Williams, a CFO who'd been passed over for promotion at 3 different firms despite outperforming her peers. And Marcus Webb, a sales genius who understood that truth-telling could be the ultimate product in an age of deepfakes and disinformation. Together, they'd grown Rigor 8 from a 4-person startup in a converted garage to a company valued at $900 million. The IPO was supposed to be their victory lap, the moment when they proved that you could build something ethical and successful in Silicon Valley. Now, sitting in her dark apartment, with only the glow of computer screens for company, Selena understood how naive she'd been. She'd protected against external threats, while the real danger had been sitting in her boardroom all along, smiling at her jokes and plotting her downfall. The camera feeds painted a damning picture. In the executive conference room, her former partners were busy at work, but not on the IPO preparations. They were systematically transferring Rigor 8's core technology to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Every algorithm she'd developed, every patent filed in the company's name, every line of code that represented years of her life being quietly siphoned away. The beauty is, David was explaining to someone on speakerphone, Once the IPO goes through, we'll have legitimate reasons to offshore the technology for tax purposes. By the time anyone notices, Hayes won't have standing to challenge it. After all, she resigned due to mental health issues. Sarah laughed, a sound that made Selena's skin crawl. Mental health issues. God, the media is eating it up. Did you see the Reuters piece? They're already speculating about the pressures of being a black woman in tech. It's perfect. What about her equity? The voice on the phone asked. She still owns 31%. Not for long. Marcus chimed in. The morality clause in our operating agreement is very clear. If a founder engages in behavior detrimental to the company's reputation, their shares can be bought back at a substantial discount. And what's more detrimental than a public mental breakdown? Selena's hands clenched into fists. A morality clause she'd insisted on to protect against bad actors. They were using her own safeguards against her. On another monitor, she pulled up the evidence of her supposed breakdown. It was sophisticated. She had to admit, deep-faked video of her screaming at employees, doctored emails showing erratic behavior, even a fraudulent police report claiming she'd been found wandering the streets in a dissociative state. If she hadn't known better, she might have believed it herself, but they'd made mistakes. Tiny ones. The kind only someone who'd spent years building anti-fraud technology would notice. Compression artifacts in the video that didn't match standard recording devices, metadata timestamps that preceded the alleged events, email headers that showed routing through servers that didn't exist when the messages were supposedly sent. More importantly, they'd forgotten about the ghost network. In their arrogance, they assumed that deactivating her official access meant she was locked out entirely. They didn't know about the backdoor she'd built in the very first week. Paranoid about corporate espionage, they didn't know about the cameras hidden in the light fixtures, the microphones embedded in the conference room table, the keystroke loggers that captured every betrayal in real time. For 48 hours, Selena didn't sleep. She watched, recorded, documented. She saw David meet with representatives from Apex Ventures, the firm she'd specifically refused to work with because of their history of hostile takeovers. She watched Sarah create fraudulent financial projections that inflated Rigor 8's value by 300%. She listened as Marcus coached employees on what to say if anyone asked about her departure. She was becoming increasingly erratic. He instructed the senior staff in a meeting that was supposedly about IPO preparation. If anyone from the media contacts you, that's the line. Erratic. Unstable. We tried to help her, but she refused. Such a shame. Such a shame. The words echoed in the darkness of her apartment. They thought they'd broken her, cast her out like defective code. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Selena began to code. Not the polished, user-friendly interfaces Rigor 8 was known for, but something rawer, more powerful. A program that would verify, authenticate, and disseminate the truth in a way that couldn't be stopped or suppressed. She worked with the fury of a woman who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. As the hours ticked by, she pieced together the full scope of their plan. The IPO was scheduled for Friday morning, with major media coverage and a who's who of Silicon Valley in attendance. Once the company went public at an inflated valuation, they would quickly execute the Cayman transfer, citing new international expansion plans. Investors would be left holding shares in a company stripped of its core assets, while David, Sarah, and Marcus walked away with hundreds of millions in offshore accounts. It was corporate theft on a massive scale, dressed up in legal language and hidden behind a story of a troubled black woman who couldn't handle success. They'd even scheduled sympathetic interviews where they would speak sadly about how they'd tried to support her, how diversity was still so important to them, despite this unfortunate situation. But Selena had one advantage they hadn't counted on. She'd built Rigor 8's verification systems to be incorruptible, and those systems were still running, still recording, still waiting for someone who knew how to access them. Every email they'd sent, every document they'd forged, every secret meeting, all of it was preserved in quantum encrypted storage that only she could access. Thursday night, less than 12 hours before the IPO, Selena made her move. She uploaded everything to a secure server, then created an automated distribution system that would ensure the truth couldn't be buried. She wasn't just going to expose them. She was going to use Rigor 8's own technology to verify the authenticity of every piece of evidence. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Selena. It was David. Of course, he was monitoring her communications. I'm disappointed you're not resting like we discussed. How long? She asked, her voice steady. How long have you been planning this? A pause. Does it matter? You were always too idealistic, too rigid. Business requires flexibility. You should have taken the buyout we offered last year. The one that would have given you control? I remember. You could have walked away rich. Instead, you had to be difficult. You had to be the crusader. His voice hardened. Do you know how many opportunities you cost us with your ethical standards? How many deals fell through because you wouldn't play ball? You mean how many times I stopped you from selling out our users' data? He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Always so righteous. Tell me, how's that righteousness feeling now? You're nobody. A footnote. By tomorrow afternoon, Rigor 8 will be the most valuable IPO of the year, and you'll be remembered as the unstable founder who couldn't handle the pressure. We'll see about that. What are you going to do? Tweet about it? Call a press conference? Who's going to believe the woman who had a mental breakdown? We have video evidence, police reports, multiple witness statements. You're done. Selena, accept it. She smiled, though he couldn't see it. You know what your problem is, David. You never really understood what we built here. You saw the profits, the valuations, the exit strategies, but you never understood the technology. I understand it perfectly. It's all documented, all transferred. We don't need you anymore. No, you don't understand. Rigor 8 was never just about detecting fraud. It was about protecting the truth. And the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Spare me the philosophy. Enjoy obscurity. Selena, you earned it. The line went dead. Selena set down her phone and turned back to her screens. One more night. One more night. And then the truth would have its day. Friday morning dawned bright and cold in San Francisco. The financial district hummed with anticipation as news vans clustered around the NASDAQ building where Rigor 8 would ring the opening bell. Inside the company's headquarters, employees wore specially designed T-shirts celebrating the IPO. Champagne waited on ice. The conference room had been transformed into a command center with screens showing pre-market trading, social media sentiment, and live news feeds. David Chen stood at the center of it all, looking every inch the successful tech CEO in his perfectly tailored suit. Sarah Williams checked figures on her tablet, occasionally calling out numbers that made investors smile. Marcus Webb worked the room, shaking hands and slapping backs, the consummate salesman closing the deal of a lifetime. 30 minutes to bell. Someone called out. The energy in the room ratcheted up another notch. On CNBC, the anchors were discussing Rigor 8's meteoric rise. It's a shame about Selena Hayes. One said, she had such promise, But sometimes the pressure of leadership is just too much. Indeed, her co-anchor agreed. But the company seems to be in capable hands. David Chen has really stepped up in this difficult time. David allowed himself a small smile. Everything was going according to plan. The IPO would price at the top of the range, making them all unimaginably wealthy. The Cayman transfer was already in motion, hidden in the complexity of the public offering. By Monday, they would have everything, and Selena would have nothing but regrets. Mr. Chen? An assistant appeared at his elbow. There's someone from tech support who says it's urgent. Something about the presentation system. David waved dismissively. Handle it. Nothing stops this IPO. But the assistant persisted. Sir, he says it's about the live stream. All the screens are showing something. Unexpected. A cold finger of dread traced down David's spine. He turned to the main presentation screen, just as it flickered from the Rigor 8 logo to something else entirely. Selena's face filled the screen. Not the haggard, broken woman they'd painted her as, but calm, composed, professional. She sat in what looked like a home office. Rigor 8's original prototype server visible behind her, the one they'd built in her garage. The one that started it all. Good morning, she said, her voice carrying through the speakers with crystal clarity. I'm Selena Hayes, founder and rightful CEO of Rigor 8. By now, you've heard that I stepped down due to mental health concerns. I'm here to tell you the truth. David lunged for the control panel, but nothing responded. Sarah was frantically typing on her laptop, trying to cut the feed. Around the room, too, phones began buzzing as the same stream appeared on every screen: computers, tablets, phones, even the coffee machine's smart display. 5 days ago, Selena continued, I was forcibly removed from the company I founded, not because of any mental health issues, but because I refused to participate in what amounts to the largest corporate theft in tech history. I have evidence. The screen split. On one side, Selena. On the other, surveillance footage from the conference room. Timestamped. Verified. Indisputable. Once she's out, we move everything to Cayman. David's voice, clear as day. The room watched in horror as their own words came back to haunt them. Every scheme, every lie, every moment of betrayal played out in high definition. But wait, someone in the room said, that could be faked. Deep faked. How do we know? Selena seemed to anticipate the question. I know some of you are wondering if this evidence is real. After all, we live in an age of deep fakes and manipulated media. That's why I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust Rigor 8. The screen changed again. Now, it showed Rigor 8's own verification interface. The same technology companies paid millions to access. Each piece of evidence was being run through their proprietary authentication system in real time. Green checkmarks appeared next to each file. Verified. Authentic. Unaltered. Every document. Every video. Every audio file has been verified by Rigor 8's own systems. Selena explained. The same systems my former partners are trying to steal and offshore as we speak. The irony isn't lost on me. They're being exposed by the very technology they're attempting to steal. In the conference room, chaos erupted. Investors were on their phones, demanding answers. Employees stood frozen, watching their IPO dreams crumble in real time. Someone from legal was shouting about halting the broadcast, but it was too late. The stream had already gone viral, spreading across every platform, every news outlet, every corner of the internet. I built Rigor 8 to protect the truth. Selena said, her voice cutting through the noise. My mother lost her job because she couldn't prove the truth about corporate discrimination. I swore that would never happen to anyone else on my watch. But I never imagined I'd need to use it to protect myself. More evidence flashed across the screen. The forged documents, the deep-faked videos, the fraudulent financial projections. Each lie carefully documented, verified, and exposed. The Cayman shell companies, the secret investor meetings, the plan to gut Riger 8 and leave shareholders with nothing. Holy shit, someone whispered. She's got everything. David's phone rang. The caller ID showed their lead investor from Apex Ventures. Then Sarah's phone. Then Marcus's. Within seconds, every phone in the room was ringing. A cacophony of panic and recrimination. On the screen, Selena leaned forward slightly. To the employees of Riger 8, many of whom are watching this. You are not complicit in this. You believe the lies because they were expertly crafted. But now you know the truth. To the investors preparing to purchase shares, you deserve to know what you're really buying. And to David, Sarah, and Marcus, if you're watching, you taught me a valuable lesson. Trust, once broken, can never be repaired. But truth, once revealed, can never be hidden again. The stream continued, methodically laying out evidence that painted a picture of corporate malfeasance so comprehensive, so undeniable, that even the most skeptical observer couldn't dismiss it. Internal emails discussing the Hayes problem, financial records showing millions being prepared for offshore transfer, legal documents predated to support their false narrative. But the killing blow came when Selena revealed something even more damaging. 3 years ago, when we were struggling to make payroll, I could have sold out. Apex Ventures offered me $50 million for my shares. I refused, because I believed in what we were building. I believed in my partners. That belief cost me everything. She paused, her composure cracking just slightly. But it also saved everything. Because when you build something true, something honest, it has a way of protecting itself. And everyone who touches it. The screen changed one final time. Now it showed a live feed of the NASDAQ, where Riger 8 was supposed to begin trading in minutes. But instead of the opening bell, there was confusion. Officials huddling in urgent conversation. Trading in Riger 8 has been suspended pending investigation. A news anchor's voice cut in. The SEC has announced an emergency halt following extraordinary revelations about corporate governance and potential fraud. This is unprecedented in IPO history. In the conference room, David sank into a chair, his face ash gray. Sarah had stopped trying to kill the feed and was instead on the phone with her lawyer. Marcus stood at the window, watching the news vans multiply outside like antibodies responding to an infection. It's over, someone said quietly. But Selena wasn't finished. I want to be clear about something. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. It's about ensuring that the next brilliant mind who comes from where I come from, who looks like me, who refuses to compromise their values, that person won't be discarded the moment they become inconvenient. She stood up, moving closer to the camera. Behind her, the original Riger 8 server blinked steadily, a heartbeat of light in the darkness. Riger 8 will survive this. The technology is too important, the mission too vital, but it will survive under leadership that understands what we're really building here. Not just a company, but a commitment to truth in an age of lies. The feed began to fade, but her final words rang out clear. I didn't build a company. I built a system that protects the truth, and the truth will always find a way. The screen went dark. in conference rooms and trading floors, in newsrooms and living rooms. Millions of people sat in stunned silence. The IPO that was supposed to mint new millionaires had become the most public corporate scandal in Silicon Valley history. Within minutes, the first arrests were made. SEC agents, who had been watching the stream from their offices, moved with surprising speed. David Chen was taken into custody at Rigor 8 headquarters. The cameras he'd arranged to document his triumph, instead capturing his downfall. Sarah Williams tried to flee, but was stopped at the airport. Her hastily packed bag full of hard drives that would become evidence. Marcus Webb, ever the dealmaker, tried to negotiate immunity in exchange for testimony, only to discover that Selena's evidence made his cooperation unnecessary. The legal machinery ground into motion with unusual efficiency. Federal prosecutors, armed with verified evidence that met every standard of admissibility, filed charges ranging from wire fraud to conspiracy. The Cayman shell companies were frozen before a single dollar could be transferred. Investors who had been prepared to sue found themselves instead praising the system that had protected them from catastrophic losses. But the real drama was just beginning at Rigor 8 itself. With the executive team under arrest and the IPO canceled, the company faced an existential crisis. Employees gathered in confused clusters, unsure whether they still had jobs, whether the technology they'd built would survive, whether anything they'd believed about their workplace was true. It was then that Tanya Morrison, Rigor 8's head of engineering and one of the few black women in senior management, stood up in the main workspace. "I've just been contacted by the board," she announced, her voice carrying over the chaos, given the extraordinary circumstances. "They're calling an emergency meeting. All shareholders will vote on new leadership." "Who are the candidates?" someone called out. Tanya smiled slightly. "As of 5 minutes ago, a coalition of minority shareholders has put forward a single name for CEO, someone who understands this technology better than anyone, someone whose commitment to our mission has been proven beyond doubt." She didn't need to say the name. Everyone already knew. The vote was held electronically, using Rigor 8's own verification systems to ensure accuracy. It wasn't close. Institutional investors, burned by the near miss of fraud, voted overwhelmingly to restore confidence. Employees, given voting rights through their stock options, unanimously supported the only leader they truly trusted. Even some of the VCs, reading the writing on the wall, cast their votes for stability over chaos. Selena Hayes was reinstated as CEO of Rigor 8 with 94% approval. She returned to headquarters on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after being escorted out. No security guards this time. No hostile faces. Instead, she found the lobby filled with employees who broke into spontaneous applause as she entered. Some were crying. Others held signs, "Truth wins," and "Welcome home." Selena stopped in the center of the lobby, taking it all in. These people had been lied to, manipulated, used as pawns in a game they didn't know was being played. But they were still here, still believing in what Rigor 8 could be. "Thank you," she said simply. "Now let's get back to work." The months that followed were a masterclass in principled leadership. Selena's first act was to restructure the board. Bringing in diverse voices from across the industry, she instituted new governance measures that made the kind of coup she'd survived impossible to repeat. Most radically, she allocated 20% of company equity to a trust for employees, ensuring that those who built Rigor 8 would share in its success. The technology roadmap was refocused on its original mission. Instead of chasing valuations, they chased impact. New tools for journalists to verify sources, systems for whistleblowers to document corporate wrongdoing, platforms for everyday people to prove their truth against those who would silence them. The IPO, when it finally happened 6 months later, was different from anything Silicon Valley had seen. Instead of a handful of insiders getting rich, thousands of employees, from engineers to janitors, rang the opening bell together. The stock priced conservatively, but fairly, and Rigor 8 began its public life as a company built on unshakable foundations. David Chen was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, his fall from grace complete. Sarah Williams received 6 years and was permanently barred from serving as a financial officer. Marcus Webb, despite his attempted cooperation, got 4 years and emerged to find himself unemployable in any legitimate business. But Selena took no satisfaction in their punishment. She was too busy building the future she'd always envisioned. Under her leadership, Rigor 8 grew from a $900 million valuation to over $10 billion in 3 years. More importantly, it became a beacon for entrepreneurs who refused to compromise their values for growth. She established the Hayes Foundation, funding scholarships for Black women in computer science. She mentored dozens of young founders, teaching them not just how to code or raise capital, but how to protect themselves and their vision from those who would steal both. The garage where Rigor 8 was born became a museum of sorts, preserved as a reminder of where they'd come from. School groups would visit, and Selena would sometimes appear unannounced, sitting with wide-eyed children and showing them how to write their first lines of code on the same laptop she'd used to save her company. The truth isn't always comfortable, she would tell them. It isn't always profitable, but it's always necessary, and if you build systems that protect it, nurture it, and amplify it, you'll build something that can never be stolen from you. At evenings, Selena would sometimes walk through Rigor 8's offices after hours. The company now occupied 3 buildings, employed thousands, and protected truth for millions of users worldwide. But in the server room, humming with the same quiet intensity it always had, sat the original machine she'd built in her garage. She'd had it installed there, despite it being obsolete. As a reminder, she would stand before it, hand resting on its warm metal surface, and think about her mother. Patricia Hayes had lived to see her daughter's vindication, had been there in the front row when Selena rang the IPO bell for real. She cried that day, not just for what Selena had achieved, but for what it meant to everyone who'd been silenced, dismissed. Ira said, "You did it, baby," her mother had whispered. "You built something they couldn't steal." Standing in the server room, surrounded by the technology that had saved her and the company she'd refused to let die, Selena knew her mother was right. She hadn't just built a company or a technology platform. She'd built a system that protected truth, and, in doing so, had protected herself and countless others from those who would twist it for their own gain. The server hummed steadily, its lights blinking in ancient patterns. Somewhere in the building, a young engineer was probably pulling an all-nighter, driven by the same passion that had kept Selena coding through the night years ago. Somewhere else, Rigor 8's systems were verifying truth, protecting whistleblowers, ensuring that evidence couldn't be buried or twisted. And in boardrooms across Silicon Valley, executives thought twice before trying to silence inconvenient voices, knowing that truth had a way of surfacing, especially when someone like Selena Hayes had built the very systems designed to protect it. She smiled, patted the old server like an old friend, and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles for truth, in an industry that often preferred comfortable lies. But tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that she'd built something unbreakable. Not a company, not a fortune, but a fortress for truth in a world that desperately needed one. As she drove through the streets of San Francisco, past the gleaming towers of tech companies built on compromise and exploitation, Selena Hayes knew exactly who she was. Not the discarded founder they'd tried to erase, not the cautionary tale they'd tried to make her, but the woman who'd looked power in the eye and refused to blink, the woman who'd built a system that protected the truth, and won.